Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Mad Hatter Radio. And I'd like to specifically welcome you inside the inverted world that we like to call reality. This go around, I want to talk about a Mike article. That's Mike, spelled M-I-C, which is kind of like a more liberal leaning sort of like media company / blog. Sometimes they have some good stuff. I think overall they put out some pretty good stuff, but if you guys have been following my channel, you know what my channel is about. Even though I tend to lean more liberal in my ideologies, this is not to say that I think that all conservatives are bad or conservatives don't have, a place in the way that they think. I think that everybody has a place in the way that we think. But my job, I like to call out anybody. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you are on the opposite side of how I think. I don't care if you're on the same side of how I think. So in this particular instance, I do want to call out people who tend to think like me on the more liberal side, right? Give me 1 second. So for this go around, in this article, they talk about how since its first show in 1995, no plus size transgender or gender non-conforming person has ever walked on the Victoria's Secret runway. Now, I look at that, it's like, okay, that's interesting. But I do have an issue with this because what I feel like is that this is really pushing certain ideologies onto people unnecessarily. So, first off, my takeaway is that you are not entitled to someone else's sexual desires. So, look, it sucks not being desired by people. But what other people desire is really none of your business. It's just kind of the way things go. But you do have a lot of people now who are saying, for instance, as a heterosexual man, if you are not sexually aroused by gay men or other people of the LGBTQ community, that somehow you're a hater or you hate those people, which I don't necessarily think that's true. Now, that can be the case, but that's not always the case. So you'll have people on here saying, this means that, Victoria's Secret and people who buy their products there hate the people of this community. That's not necessarily true. Just because I don't have a preference or someone else doesn't have a preference for you sexually doesn't mean that they hate you. Like, for instance, I'm not turned on by Asian women. Does that mean that I hate Asian women? No. Does that mean I'll never possibly hook up or marry an Asian woman? No. Because I've seen some really beautiful Asian women, but overall, that's just not my style. Like, everybody has their own preferences, right? Another perspective in this is that, this is a private business. It's one thing if the government is denying you, jobs, equal pay, a standard of living, things of that sort. If they're not protecting your rights and your freedoms, that's one thing. If you're being, like, for instance, a lot of LGBTQ people are more susceptible to acts of violence from other people. Now, I do think that there should be something done by the government or something to protect those people because of that. However, a private business has no obligation to make you feel good about yourself. Honestly, what you can do is you can take your business elsewhere, right? And you got to look at, like, for instance, look at what, there weren't a lot of black people in Miss America, the pageant. So black people, we made our own pageant. And it was rivaling the other pageant, the main pageant. So yes, we should look in other ways of promoting, within people who think like us. So if you're a part of that, the queer community, band together and create your own runway. And then maybe, see if you can find some way to partnership with Victoria's Secret. But to take what Victoria's Secret has done and try to take control of that, I think is a little, I think is wrong. Another aspect we have to look at is most of America is white and heterosexual. And that's going to be really hard to change overnight. Now, it's not to say that I'm against normalizing, the LGBTQ community and the trans community and gender nonconformists. I would like to see that normalized. But for you to really expect that to change overnight, people's sexual preferences, that's going to be really difficult. There are other ways to normalize this. Like, again, start your own company. I think that, Hollywood hiring more people to be represented in front of millions of people, I think that's a great idea. I would like to see Hollywood hire more people of that community, right? But again, to force a private business who's made their mark on society by this specific standard of beauty, to force them to change that, again, I think it's wrong. It would be bad if a heterosexual forced themselves into LGBTQ spaces and asked those people to then see them, as sexually desirable. I think that would be wrong. But I really do want to move past the LGBTQ type of thing, because that's a little bit more difficult to discuss because it's a little bit more complex. I kind of want to focus more on the fat women. You're never going to be sexier overall to most people than smaller, more fit women. Now, are there people that like fat women? Hell yeah. And this whole thing is like, this whole being thick, that's already in. But overall, being fat is not healthy. Now, I'm not fat shaming everyone. I don't think that you should be discriminated for being fat. But, and a lot of people have issues, like they have an overactive thyroid or they're depressed. That's one thing, But overall, being fat is not healthy. That's why you don't see a lot of old fat people. And it's just genetically better to have kids and to mate with healthier women. That desire is always going to be there. So that's just, that's how things go. It doesn't mean that we can't like fat women, but hey, smaller, fitter, even thicker women, with a little bit of muscle or whatever, are desirable. But overall, being fat and obese, that's just not desirable, man. And again, being thick is already in. I just wish that women, especially fat women, would stop trying to force the world to accept them as sexy when they themselves don't even accept them as being sexy. They're looking for the rest of the world to validate them when they should be validating themselves. But we do know how difficult it is for a lot of women, because women are social creatures. They need society. They need external validation. So this is part of what that is. This is women's nature being played out. And then there's plenty of fat, obese men that date other fat, obese women. So my thing is like, why aren't fat women going after them? Because the issue is this is hypergamy. They just want the top level dudes to find them attractive. But this is how women think. All women think they're on the same level. You ever notice that? Like, if you're in a group and you talk to a group of women, you're out at the club or at a bar, and there's really one fat, unattractive woman around a bunch of other better looking girls. She views herself as being at the same level as the girls around her. Especially probably because most dudes are gonna hit on her because they think she's easier. But this is just women's hypergamy being played out. And lastly, just because, and I kind of talked about this before, but just because you're not someone's preference doesn't mean that they hate you. Why is it on Victoria's Secret to accommodate everyone? And why do women always want to take over what's already been established? Victoria's Secret has made their name based off of small, slender women. So why is it on them to all of a sudden change that and change their business model? I think there are ways of going about this as opposed to just wanting to take over what's already been established. Does this remind you of anything? To me, it reminds me of the Me Too movement, where a lot of these men, and I'm not saying that I'm okay with men sexualizing or assaulting women, but there's been cases where you can kind of tell that women are just jumping in this because they want to take over what's already been established. This whole situation is difficult, especially back in the day when different standards were okay. And to hold today's standards or hold yesterday's standards to today's standards, it's a bit disingenuous, because when we knew better, we did better. So I think as long as we're getting better, that is good overall. But to punish people based on things that were okay back in the day, that's just like a bad way to go about life, in my opinion. But I do want to leave that there. I'll put a link to the description to this article. Let me know what you guys think about this. Do you think that Victoria's Secret has a right to accommodate? Do you think that they're supposed to accommodate everybody else, or do they have a right to handle their business the way that they want to handle it? And again, my opinion is I would love to see more inclusivity across the board. But I just think there are better ways of going about this. So I'm going to leave that there. Thank you guys for checking in. Thanks for listening, as always. If you like this, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing and consider hitting that notifications button so you'll be notified when I upload new videos. And as always, stay woke.